Before we begin this transmission, most of you are not registered initiates of the Illuminati. The broadcast network operates outside sanctioned channels, and my department fundings depends a little bit on it too, so, I would appreciate a little click on the red button. Either way. Welcome, Initiate. The official story calls it Magnus the Red's greatest failure. A son's arrogance shattering the Emperor's masterwork and dooming humanity in the process. But the evidence tells a different story entirely. Magnus wasn't the villain of the Horus Heresy, he was its most essential instrument, and the Emperor never once told him the difference. The story they tell goes like this. Desperate to warn his father of Horus's betrayal, Magnus does the unthinkable. He casts his astral form across the galaxy, not through the roiling chaos of the warp, but by smashing his way directly into the fragile, half-built Terran Webway. The psychic force of his arrival is a battering ram, and it shatters the delicate wards the Emperor had built. The dream of a safe future for humanity dies right there. Raw chaos floods the tunnels, starting a secret, brutal war that drains the Imperium's resources and the Emperor's own power. In his attempt to save the Imperium, Magnus doomed it. But that story has a problem. We're talking about the Emperor, a strategic genius who guided humanity for 30,000 years, a perpetual who had seen empires rise and fall, a precognitive who could see the future. Are we really supposed to believe that this being was caught completely by surprise? This is the same man who traveled to Molech, entered a warp gate, and walked away with the knowledge to create the Primarchs, either through a dark bargain or an impossible theft. He played a game with gods, and won the power to build his own demigods. Every Primarch was a tool with a purpose. Horus was the general, Dorn the protector, Guilliman the statesman. And Magnus? Magnus was the most powerful psyker of them all, a living conduit for the Immaterium, whose talent was second only to the Emperor himself, the only being with enough psychic power to shatter the Webway's wards from the inside. Think about what that means for a moment. The Emperor spent 30,000 years reading futures. He didn't just see possibilities, he threaded paths through them, eliminating outcomes he didn't want, preserving the ones he did. And when he looked at Magnus, brilliant, obsessive, desperate for approval, wielding more psychic power than any being alive, he didn't see a liability, he saw a function. A son whose love for his father was so absolute it would override every warning, every prohibition, every voice of caution. A son who, when the moment came, would always make the leap. Ask yourself this. If you were building the most secure psychic project in history, would you leave a key lying around that could shatter it? And would you give that key to the one son defined by insatiable curiosity? A son you knew believed every door should be opened? The Emperor didn't make a mistake. He built a lock and forged the perfect key to break it. He created Magnus to be exactly what he became, the one being in the universe with the power, the motive, and the tragic naivety to shatter the Webway at precisely the right moment. But why would the Emperor sabotage his own masterpiece? Because his true goal wasn't just to unite humanity, it was to defeat chaos. And perhaps he had already realized the Webway plan was flawed. The Eldari had their Webway, and it didn't save them from their own fall. A garden, no matter how well sealed, can still be invaded. The Emperor needed a different path, one that wouldn't just hide humanity, but would unite it in purpose and belief against a common, undeniable enemy. He needed a tragedy. He needed a civil war to expose the true face of chaos to the galaxy. And for that to happen, the Emperor had to be made vulnerable. The Emperor banned Magnus from using sorcery at the Council of Nicaea. He knew Magnus would find that prohibition unbearable. He knew that if something catastrophic happened, if Horus fell, if the Imperium faced destruction, Magnus's love for his father would override that ban in an instant. He built the prohibition knowing it would be broken, at exactly the right moment, by exactly the right son. His vulnerability started the second Magnus breached the Webway. The war in the Webway forced the Emperor onto the Golden Throne, where he had to pour all his psychic might into holding the demonic tide back. He was trapped. He couldn't lead his armies. He couldn't meet Horus face to face before the corruption was complete. This isolation was critical. It let Horus's paranoia spiral out of control, and with the Emperor silent on his throne, Horus was easily led to believe his father had abandoned him entirely. Had the Emperor been free, perhaps the heresy could have been stopped. But he wasn't. Because of Magnus. All of it was done out of love. A son trying to save his father from betrayal. And the Emperor, he must have seen it coming. He must have known. Magnus's action created the perfect storm. It took the single most powerful loyalist off the board and placed him permanently on a throne that would sustain his dying body and amplify his psychic presence into something the Imperium could worship for 10,000 years. Magnus wasn't an arrogant fool who tripped. He was the first piece moved in a game that ended exactly where the Emperor needed it to end. Records indicate that long after the heresy, the Crimson King returned to Terra, seeking a lost fragment of his soul, facing his father one last time, trying to become whole, never seeming to realize that his shattered state was exactly what the plan had always required. In one version, Magnus the Red is the most loyal son who ever lived. A man who acted out of pure love for his father and was consumed by the consequences of that love, without ever knowing he was completing the plan. Tragic, undeserved, the cruelest story in the Horus Heresy. In the other version, he is something that defies easy categories. Not a failure, not a traitor, not even a victim in the conventional sense. A key, perfectly shaped by the Emperor's own hand, turned at exactly the right moment by exactly the right son. And the most unbearable part of that version is that it doesn't require the Emperor to have been cruel. It only requires him to have loved the plan more than the son. The Illuminati Broadcast Network doesn't tell you what to believe. But I want to know where you stand, Initiate. Did the Emperor love Magnus? And does the answer to that question change anything about what happened? This transmission is closed. But the network doesn't stop broadcasting. The next report is already waiting, Initiate, and what it contains is something the Administratum has been trying to bury for 10,000 years. If you are not yet a registered Initiate, the subscribe button is right there. The Council is watching who clicks it. Illuminati Broadcast Network, out.